Hi, the SI meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday, March 20th. Well, spring has officially begun earlier this morning. If you take a look at the calendar, yes indeed, spring has officially begun. However, if there was ever a case where you could postpone spring, this would be the case. The overall weather pattern looks to be colder than normal in the Mid-Atlantic region, not only through the rest of March, but it looks like well into the month of April as well. It's quite an impressive look, as a matter of fact, for the next several weeks, and we'll talk about that at the beginning part of this video. Towards the end of the video, we'll focus in on a near-term event where it looks like we could have some snow shower activity up and down the I-95 corridor late tonight and tomorrow morning. It could even cause some slick spots for the morning commute in and around Philly, New York, and D.C., and we'll focus in on that later on. But first, let's kind of look at the next few weeks as, again, it's quite an impressive looking cold weather pattern for this time of the year, for the beginning of spring. Well, one of the indices we look at is the Arctic Oscillation. That combined with the North Atlantic Oscillation Index give us an indication if there could be a blocking pattern setting up in the upper part of the atmosphere to our north, generally across Canada or Greenland. Well, here's the current look at the Arctic Oscillation. It is already in negative territory right here. This is in fact the zero line, the neutral line. You notice over the next few days it's forecasted to go all the way down into this region right here, which is -5 or so on the particular scale that is used for this. Notice over the last several months, so going all the way back to December, the Arctic Oscillation did not ever get that low. This goes all the way back to the beginning of December, and it's reaching some levels here over the next couple of days that haven't been seen in months. And typically that leads to gives us an indication that a blocking pattern in the atmosphere could set up. And in fact, let's take a look at a forecast map right now for the end of the week. This is in fact a forecast map for Friday evening from the European model run of a couple of nights ago, and it shows the 500 millibar pattern. This is the upper atmosphere, about 18,000 feet or so, and we're kind of drawn on here the wind flow. The winds basically parallel these lines here drawn in this particular upper level map of the 500 millibar height pattern. Notice it follows the shape of the Greek letter omega, hence meteorologists call this kind of a blocking pattern, an omega blocking pattern. Systems will move very slowly from west to east when they encounter a blocking pattern like this in the upper atmosphere. And depending on which part of the block you're in, you can have days and days and days of cold weather or warm weather or wet weather or dry weather, depending on where you fall. And now notice here, we have a flow coming down from central and northern Canada into the central and eastern part of the U.S., right around here, the Mid-Atlantic region. We'll be kind of in that cold part of this blocking pattern, not only for the next week or two, but it looks like heading into the month of April now, we'll have colder than normal temperatures. On the whole, not every single day will be below normal, but on the whole, the next several weeks look to be quite a bit below normal, a rather impressive looking omega blocking pattern setting up here across Canada, and we'll monitor that over the next several days. Well, what I'm showing here is the 6 to 10 day forecast from the NOAA National Weather Service forecasters, basically for next week. And where you see purple and blue is below normal, and the darker and darker areas are the highest probabilities of below normal. And this has just kind of caught my eye because you hardly ever see a color range like this, because it's going to be so much colder than normal. And notice there's no above normal in the entire country. The interior west is relatively normal here, but along the west coast and the entire eastern half of the nation, not only below normal, but substantially below normal for the next week time period. Now, one thing to point out here, normal high temperatures this time of the year, for example, in Philadelphia, are around 53, 54 degrees. So even if you're incredibly below normal, like 20 degrees below normal, you'll have high temperatures in the low to mid 30s. Not brutal cold. If this were January, this would be incredible cold. But relative to normal, it's just an incredible pattern setting up for the next several weeks. Well, before we get to the short-term forecast, let's continue to focus in on the longer term, the colder than normal weather pattern here setting up right into the month of April. This is a forecast map. NOAA puts out a longer-term forecast model called the CFS, Coupled Forecast System, And this has a weekly display here of the temperature anomalies for the U.S. And I just wanted to point out, because this is rather impressive looking as well in terms of colder than normal temperatures for several weeks to come. Here we have the greens and light blues here representing below normal temperatures throughout the eastern and central part of the U.S. This is for next week time frame, March 25th to March 29th. The following week, same kind of a pattern here from this particular NOAA longer term model. Colder than normal in the central and eastern U.S. This takes us right into the beginning of April, ending April 2nd. Let's now jump ahead to weeks 3 and 4. Again, the same model here, the coupled forecast system model called CFS, put out by NOAA. This is April 2nd to April 8th, well into April now. Continued below normal temperatures in the central and eastern part of the country. And finally, going to the middle part of April here, weeks 4 in this particular forecast from April 8th to April 15th, continued below normal temperatures. Perhaps not quite as bad as the prior couple of weeks, but nonetheless, this model is forecasting on a weekly basis below normal temperatures for the central and eastern U.S. right into the middle of April. And one final forecast map from the CFS model. This is actually a monthly forecast for the month of April. And again, here we go, below normal temperatures pretty much for the whole U.S., but certainly for the central and eastern U.S., maybe upper New England. According to this model, will have an above normal temperature pattern in the month of April. But very impressive from the CFS model. Not necessarily the most accurate of models, but it's been pretty accurate in recent weeks. And nonetheless, putting out a signal like this raises a red flag that certainly you have colder than normal weather pattern setting up here in the central and eastern U.S. for weeks to come. Well, let's now focus in on the short term, because indeed we have some snow headed for the I-95 corridor. Not a big storm at all, but it certainly can cause some slick spots, really from D.C. to Baltimore to Philadelphia, even New York City, late tonight and tomorrow morning. This is the forecast map from last night's GFS 0Z model run for this evening. Notice some precipitation gathering here in cold air as a secondary cold front heads towards the east coast. Is a weak secondary cold front, kind of depicted here by this kink in the isobar pattern right here, and a low already situated off the coast. And they kind of combine off the coast later on tonight to form, intensify that low pressure area. And you'll see in a moment it kind of throws back some more precip back into the I-95 corridor. So this is the early evening forecast for tonight. Now here's the forecast map for late tonight, around 2 o'clock in the morning. An area of precipitation, mainly in the form of snow, right up and down the I-95 corridor. Even a little bit of perhaps a low pressure area right here developing along that funnel boundary, and the main low is off the coast here, and they kind of combine by tomorrow morning. But the main point here is that we have an area of precipitation, and again, this is in cold air, so primarily in the form of snow late tonight. By tomorrow morning, the lows kind of consolidate and intensify here well off the east coast, but enough that there's a kind of an inverted trough extending from the low in this fashion right here, and that's thrown back some snow back into the I-95 corridor. Certainly can be some snow during the morning commute from D.C. to Baltimore, Philadelphia, into New York City, and a coating to perhaps an inch or so is possible, especially in grassy surfaces and untreated road surfaces, so there can be some slick spots for the Thursday morning commute. Now notice one other thing here. The core of the cold air mass here is really coming all the way down. This is actually the coldest thickness value depicted by this model run from last night's 0Z GFS model, and the coldest part of this air mass is right here in the Middle Atlantic region as it drops to the south and east. So indeed, this will be quite chilly behind this system later on tomorrow and tomorrow night. And of course, this evolves into generally a cold weather pattern for next week as well, and really for the next several weeks, as we talked about earlier. Finally, by tomorrow afternoon, just then is this precipitation starting to pull out. In fact, the GFS still has a little bit depicted into New Jersey here with kind of an extension of a trough back towards the east coast. And again, very cold air for this time of the year, pretty much centered right over the mid-Atlantic and northeastern part of the country by later tomorrow following this system. So longer term, it looks colder than normal, and in the short term, we have some snow to deal with late tonight and early tomorrow up and down the I-95 corridor. Stay tuned for the updates later on today at the SIweather.com. That's it for now. I'm the SI meteorologist, Paul Dorian.